Nick Kyrgios has something to say to the Australian Open fans about the entire vaccine controversy surrounding Novak Djokovic. Apparently, he doesn't like the fact that some fans are going to extreme lengths when taunting the 9-time champ. Okay, some mild fun teasing might have been alright, but Kyrgios is right. Some people cross the line. Stay tuned as we tell you all about it in today's video. So let's get started. First up, the Aussie player isn't too happy with fans booing his Serbian buddy. Alright, so it's time for some facts. Novak Djokovic, the all-time great Serbian player, loves to bask in the highly complimentary glow of controversies. And that's not even an exaggeration. People have associated him with controversies so much that they're gonna drum up new stuff. Like the entire "what's in the flask" fiasco. And if the poor guy is just trying to be as unproblematic as possible, an old controversy is gonna hunt him down and put him back on the radar. That's exactly what's going on with him in the Australian Open. We're pretty sure you already know what we're talking about here. You mentioned Djokovic and Australia in the same sentence, and there's only one direction in which things are headed. Yep, we're talking about when the Australian Open dragged him down and ended up deporting him when he wouldn't get a vaccine for coronavirus. You can't really blame them here. And clearly, people are still not over it, since they've continued to boo him for his actions. But Kyrgios has appeared as Novak's knight in shining armor, and has appealed to people to stop all of this immediately. Okay, that came off as a threat, but we promise Kyrgios did it in a much nicer way. Following up, here's what the Aussie had to say to the fans who crossed the limit. Kyrgios has a rather classy request for the fans who'll be showing up to the Australian Open. He's asked everyone to treat Djokovic with the respect he deserves. But sadly, the man knows that there'll be some people, after all, who'll be crossing the line with their behavior. The good thing for Djokovic is that Kyrgios isn't the only one on his side. In fact, the Australian Open boss Craig Tiley has also clearly stated that anyone who will taunt the Serbian champion will be removed from the venue. Kyrgios said that Djokovic was worthy of a lot of respect since he was one of the greatest players the sport has ever seen. In the Aussie's own words, he's abided by the last 2 years of whatever has been dealt his way, and he's here and all he wants to do is put on a show. That sounds like a decent enough request, doesn't it? Kyrgios also mentioned that Djokovic was aiming for things no one has really aimed for before, which makes him all the more special. He also mentioned the Serb's achievements off the court, and said that all this combined made him the great star we know him as today. But that, in Kyrgios' opinion, it won't be enough to keep people from disrespecting him. He said that people were still going to cross the line. According to him, many fans won't even want him to win, which is very contradictory since they'd purchased a ticket to watch him play. And if they were going to be a clown about it, then it makes no sense. Moving on, what does Djokovic have to say about his reception in Australia? So from what we know, the Serb was pretty happy with his recent reception in South Australia at the Adelaide International, where he managed to win his 92nd tournament. But when it comes to the sort of welcome he'll be receiving in Melbourne, the man's not completely sure about that. While talking about this, he said that he could only hope that the crowd was positive and that they'd receive him well. But the man knows that it really isn't in his hands. He said that he really didn't know how things were going to go down since he couldn't predict things. So all he could do was perform well and do his best. All in all, Novak just wants to be a good ambassador of the sport. Well, that's definitely a good thought. As far as we know, he's aiming to chase down Rafael Nadal's all-time record of 22 Grand Slam titles. So he's gonna be super focused on that. And well, any extra support from the crowd would always be a good boost for the hopeful champ. Just as we mentioned earlier, other players and Open personnel have been super clear about the fact that people in the audience who are going to try to make a name for themselves were not at all welcome, and for good reason too. Now that's all we have for Nick Kyrgios and what he had to say about Novak Djokovic's return to the Australian Open after a rather scandalous deportation last year. Moving on, here's more on Djokovic's take on what went down last year. First up, he wasn't at all happy with the media portrayal of himself last year. Alright, Djokovic is a pretty famous name in the world of sports. There's no doubt about that. He's a really popular person outside of sports as well. But the entire vaccine fiasco truly managed to convert him into a globally recognized person. Now, all this is well and good until you realize that everyone just painted him as a villain during that time. So just imagine if it's your first time hearing about Djokovic and all you hear is bad stuff. Then there's a huge chance you're gonna like him afterwards. This is the problem Novak has with the way the media covered his deportation from Australia. And we get it, vaccines are a touchy subject, and emotions were running high at that time because everyone was sick of the coronavirus. But you gotta agree, the media did exaggerate and basically bullied him to a certain extent. Moving on, here's what Djokovic had to say about the coverage. Now, as the Serb is getting ready to try his luck at a 10th Australian Open title, he's opened up about how unfairly he was treated last year by the media. According to him, there was several incorrect reports surrounding him that made rounds on the internet while everything was going down, and the champ is pissed about the fact that they caused his image a lot of harm. While speaking to 9 News Melbourne, he recalled that if anything related to COVID or the vaccine was on, he'd get sucked into the media storm. That sounds like a really terrible position to be in. What's more is that Djokovic started feeling like the villain of the world, which according to him was a really terrible position to be in, especially considering the fact that he was an athlete. Following up, how did the media frenzy affect the top tennis pro? After Novak got deported from Australia, the media had a field day and pretty much went crazy with the coverage. The player recalled that the narrative surrounding him wasn't all too great and that it actually ended up affecting his loved ones a lot. On top of this, everything just became too much for him, which is why he went into hiding. Djokovic revealed that he ended up staying at his home for several weeks and refused to go out. He also mentioned that he didn't really go around much, hoping that the situation would calm down. And while somewhat luckily, it did calm down. However, the damage had already been done. Apart from this, there were some traces left. Of course, for anyone in Djokovic's position, this must have been really hard. And we can assume that at this point, he only wanted to move on from the entire drama. Now, he might seem like the sort of person who couldn't care less about what was going on, but he is human after all. The Serb opened up about how it all affected him and stated that it was very tough for him to mentally regroup and restart again. And that's not all. The media just wouldn't let him move on at all. Questions about his deportation from Australia would follow him in every press conference for months. He recalled being asked at least 1 or 2 questions about his deportation. This wasn't good for him at all, since it kept on reminding him of everything that had gone down, and the poor guy had to relive the trauma. Now for the misrepresentation of facts. Djokovic was clear about the facts regarding what went down in Melbourne last year. He said that it was understandable that people in Melbourne didn't take kindly towards the fact that he was given a special exemption from vaccination last year. And yeah, this makes sense since the city was facing what can be easily described as the hardest COVID-19 lockdown. But the way this story made it to the news, it had been really twisted. Novak also took this opportunity to open up about it and tell everyone that he wasn't the only person with the exemption. In fact, some other people with the same exemption had successfully entered the country around 10 days before. So in his mind, Novak was just following the rules. He also stated that his exemption had been verified by an independent body and that there was a panel of doctors involved as well. The player had all the right papers, so in the end when the order was given, it was all just very confusing. This was followed by things being blown out of proportion, and Novak ended up having to face the worst of it. Lastly, here's how Djokovic felt about everything. The player revealed that all this ended up having a huge impact on his legacy. In the start, everything got really huge, and it was too much to handle for him. He recalled that there was a time when he just wanted to get home since everything was hurting him. The worst of it all was the fact that many people had a completely wrong idea about him. In his own words, it was so impactful and it echoed so far around the world that a lot of people will still talk about and remember it for a long time. Well, let's just hope that the media won't attack a player like this again. That's a wrap for this video, folks. What do you think about Nick's message for Australian Open fans? Let us know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more awesome videos like this. See you in the next one with the latest updates.